Hey everyone, it's Harry from Web322. If you missed this week's lecture, um, it is pretty interesting. It's like one of my favorite lectures. It's not a lot of time. I take up the full 2 hours, I guess, and you learn about how kind of the internet works, like or how your web browser actually knows where to go on the internet to get information. So that's a DNS server and all of this HTTP and protocols. If you missed it, don't worry. There's tons of YouTube videos on this subject. Probably go look it up because you're going to want to know how to do this stuff in the future, like being a full stack developer. We also talked about libraries and how all of the software that we create is really based on other developers that have written software before, right? So like the minimize, maximize buttons, they're libraries, file, save, whatever. And again, you should kind of know that concept, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to demo how to make an Express server and dynamic site because that's the main key for everything that we do here on out in the class. So let's get right into it. Open up Visual Studio Code, open up whatever folder that you want and initialize your project. So npm initiate. Remember, we do this so that we know what dependencies, aka modules, aka libraries that we're going to use. I'm going to make my entry point called server.js. You can kind of make it whatever you want. The lab or the assignment doesn't, I don't think it tells you, but just make sure you read whatever it says. Author, put in your name, and everything else should be okay. Maybe put a description in there, whatever. When you do this, you should get package.json and with all the info in there. Next thing you want to do is install Express. So npm install Express. And if you remember, again, I'm not going to go through all the details. You should have came to the lecture, but this will install the dependency Express. Now we want to create a file called server.js, and this is going to be the file where we run all of most of our code anyway. We're going to start a really simple Express server, and again, I'm just using most of this from the web322.ca site. But if I'll make it a little bit easier, so at the top we include the library Express, and then we instantiate a new object called app, right? So this Express function is coming from the Express object, and it's like a constructor. And then this port, I don't like comments that look like this actually. Let's go on top. The port number we talked about, how a port is like the apartment building, and the IP address is the actual, or sorry, the port is the oh my god, I'm stumbling, is the apartment, and the IP address is the apartment building, effectively. So this is a simple Express server. Nothing's happening in here. If I run this code, I type node server.js, and it will start a server listening on 8080. I'm going to make it actually so I can just click on this, localhost, and then the port number. Every time you make a change in here, you're going to have to restart your server. But I did this so that I could just click on localhost. And you can see our server is running, but it cannot get our index. Again, if you kind of miss class, go research what index is and where it came from. But in this case, index is not here. So we have to tell our program that we want to create an index. And how we do this is we create a route. So at this point, we're kind of programming the actual web server, right? Not just the web page, because we want to control what the web server is sending out to our web pages. That's why, it says cannot get slash, which means it can't get the root. Sorry, it cannot get the route for index, which is considered the root and router. Yeah, kind of weird. Anyway, so here I'm going to set up a get request, and every request that we do when we type into our web browser is a get request. And this get request is just going to send back hello world, right? So if I restart the server, refresh the page, we get hello world. Now this doesn't show us any HTML. So our next step is we want to send some HTML back because that's going to contain our web page information, right? So, but before I just show you that code, remember that we have a client and we have a browser, right? And I know this is awesome paint. Client, or sorry, we have a client and a server, not a browser. And our server is a web server. And I won't draw all the DNS stuff, but basically we're making a GET request. And the server goes, okay, yeah, now I do have this get request for the route index, which is slash, and I'm going to send back hello world, right? So that's how this works. But don't forget, I'm going to shortly send back an HTML file, but the server doesn't necessarily care that we have an HTML file. It sends back an HTML quote unquote file so that the browser can read it, but we can do stuff with the file before it gets changed, or sorry, before it gets sent back. So this is how these dynamic web pages get created, because I can actually manipulate the file or whatever it is inside of this get request before it actually gets sent back, right? So just keep that in mind, because when I do this get, I can actually, do stuff in here on the server and then finally send it back. The browser just ends up getting an HTML file, but the server can manipulate it. All right, so because Node, Express is an MVC type language, what we want to do is actually create a folder called views. And inside of views, we're going to put our HTML, and in this case, I'm going to call it index. In VS Code, if you type exclamation mark and press enter, you should get a blank kind of web page, and I'm just going to call it, home, and put an H1 tag. After I do this, I'm going to go back to the server, and there's two things that I need to do. One, I want to access this directory called views, and then I want to get the data from this file, put it into a variable, and then send it out um, across our get request. So one way to do this is we need to require a new library, and the library is called path. This is a built-in library, and it just lets us get the path to certain files. That's all this kind of does. Whereas we'd have to code it a different way. It doesn't matter right now, but I want to get the path to a certain file, and then I want to read this file, and we can do. In fact, we're actually just going to send the file. Let's not even read it. So we'll do something like var path to file equals path.join. And then these are like default functions. You can go back to week 1 and check them out. And then we want index.html. So this will be the path to the file, and then we're going to actually send the file out. Send file. Why is that? Oh, uppercase. There we go. So if this works, we should, instead of getting hello world, we should get home. So restart the server, refresh the page, and there's home. If we want to make another route, right? So this is the index route, and like this. If I want to make another route, let's say for, I don't know, contact info, then I would make it whatever I want it to be, contact info, and I would send that HTML file, contact. Notice that I don't have to have the route name the same as the file. In fact, I don't even have to call it HTML if I want. I call it TXT, because at the end of the day, we're just sending data back to the browser. So I'm going to make a new file, contact.html, and h1 contact. And then we can link these, right? We could do, ahref equals slash contact. You get the idea. Restart the server, and then I can click on contact page. Oh, cannot get it. This was contact info, right? There we go. There we go. Cool. Then on the contact page, I could go and put a link back to our home. And now we have a closed kind of loop. Actually, it's just index. Oh. Pretty easy, pretty cool. So that's like the two major things to get this kind of website stuff working, right? But notice that we don't type, localhost slash views slash contact. We just do localhost contact info, because we have to actually tell this where to go when someone asks for the request. So when I request contact info, what's going on is this line right here turns into, hey, I would like contact info. But it's not asking for that file. It's just asking for the route or route. I'm sorry, you said route for contact info. And then the server goes, okay, I'm going to do some stuff, and whatever I want to do, I'm going to send it back. But it's always comes back as contact info, right? Sometimes that gets a little confusing. So the one thing I did not talk about in the lecture because we ran out of time was CSS and images. Now you should know if we have a web server running, and I want to send images or I want to include images in my HTML. I would do something like image src equals whatever the image was called, my image, right? Image JPEG, and let's go grab an image somewhere. Let's say SpaceX, right? We'll just grab some random image and we're going to save it. And I'm going to put it, let's see, documents, projects. I'm going to put it right in our project folders. Here. So here's week 4, and I'm going to just save it right here. And it should pop up. Here it is. I'm going to rename it. Oh, this is a WebP, so I'll name it SpaceX, right? So I named it SpaceX. Here's the image, and we'll call it SpaceX WebP, and I'll restart the server. Now, just note a couple things. This is not going to work, right? But I'll tell you why. So here, I'm just going to show you. Let's refresh the page, and you see there the image doesn't work. No problem. But why doesn't it work? Well, if you recall, I said when I send the GET request, can I undo this? Doesn't matter. When I send the GET request, the server isn't getting the actual contact file. It's doing stuff inside of the route and then sending it back. So the server actually doesn't know where the route is for spacex.webp, even though that it looks like it's in your main folder, but it's not. It's just in a folder, right? So even if I drop this space XWebP inside of our views, I still don't. I still can't access it because the server, it doesn't know where it is. So the first thought most new programmers would be like, okay, let's make a SpaceX WebP route. But this would suck if you had thousands of images or thousands of CSS files. So to solve this problem, we actually create a new folder called public. And I'm sorry, it's in the main folder, public. And we can tell Express that anything inside of the public folder, just serve it as it is. So meaning I don't have to create a route for it. I can just actually serve it up. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move spacex.webp into this folder. And in fact, I'm going to make an images folder and drop this in there. And then I'm going to tell the server, hey, that public folder is public. Everything inside of there can be accessed online or like from our server. So they call these static files, and we just have to add a quick little thing to the app, and it's app.use, and this is where our public files are. So now what's going on is, I wish I could undo this graphic here. Oh, I can. Okay, cool. So now what's going on is if I ask the server for just the SpaceX WebP, what's going to happen is I do the request. Oops. I do the request. Oh, what the hell? Stupid paint. Discard. I do the request. The server goes, there's no route for SpaceX.webp, but let me check the public folder. And then it'll be like, oh, yeah, I found it. I'll send it back. So now I can actually add this to my index, which should be right here. And I can do images / SpaceX web, restart the server. And there it is. Right? Huge image. On that note, this image is way too big. So I'm going to add, some CSS to this. So I'm going to do style equals, width 200 pixels. I can bring that down. Cool. So last thing, anything in this public folder is obviously public, and I'm going to put my CSS files in here. I can put JavaScript files in here, whatever. And we'll just do, site.css. And instead of hard coding this width, let's do, class equals image, I don't know, main image or something. Then in my site CSS, I'll do main image width 200 pix, and I'm going to include my script, or sorry, my CSS, which should be link src. Um, notice that I do not type the public folder name, right? It's when I told the server that I'd like to use the public folder, it's like, yeah, okay, everything inside of public you can use, but you don't type public as the postfix there. So it's actually just CSS site. Hopefully this works. Maybe not. Oh, I got to restart the server. See what's going on. Refresh. 1 second. Oh, my mistake. I see. It shouldn't be src. It should be href. So after you have href, and then you tell it the type is a CSS file. There we go. And you also have to tell it it is a style sheet. Oops. There we go. Now we should be good, which we are. That's about it. So that's it. Hopefully that helps you. I know it's a 15-minute video. Should